What's the secret to producing a short daily podcast that keeps listeners coming back day after day? This week's guest, Carey Green, has figured that out. Carey has mastered the art of creating brief, compelling content and delivering it consistently in a way that builds an engaged audience. If you've ever considered starting your own daily podcast, then this is the episode for you. Welcome to the Podcasting Secrets Show, where successful creators share their best stories, secrets, and strategies. I'm your host, Nathan Gwilliam. Hello, incurable creators. Today, I am joined by Carey Green. Carey is the founder at Podcast Fast Track, and he's the host of The Morning Mindset. He's been podcasting since 2011. He has a daily show that receives more than 40,000 downloads per episode. He's been also working with podcast production clients since 2015. And on that daily show of his, he has more than 2,500 episodes that have been downloaded more than 65 million times. Thank you so much for joining us today, Carey.
Yeah, Nathan, I'm so honored to be here, and I hope to be of help to anybody who's listening.
So today, we're going to dive in and talk about running a daily show, what it takes to do it well, how to launch it, how to grow it, how to monetize it, maybe the pros and the cons. Can you start off by sharing with us kind of your journey in creating this daily show?
Yeah, well, I guess the backstory to the daily show is that I had published a few podcasts prior to starting the daily show. So I got a lot of my learning curve done before I actually launched this show. Previous shows that I did were all weekly at best, sometimes bi-weekly. And so, it wasn't nearly the demand that this daily show was. So when it came to time for me to start this daily show, first off, I didn't want to just fly by the seat of my pants. I wanted to think it through and really provide something that mattered on a daily basis. A lot of people may have a good idea, but can you do it daily? Is it something you can pull off every single day and actually be of value to your listeners? And so I thought that was very important. So I did a little bit of research, listening to other shows that were daily, getting an idea of what it was they were providing and how they were doing what they were doing. And most of it in my thinking was personal development kind of stuff that was kind of rah, get your attitude right for the day and how are you going to succeed today, that kind of thing. And my approach was a little bit different, though it was similar enough, I guess. I have a background as being a pastor, so I had taught the scriptures many times and really felt like there was room for a podcast that was a short, helpful morning mindset sort of a thing using the scriptures to help people who are followers of Jesus or
love it.
Want to be interested in the faith to learn how to get their own mind right for the morning.
And since we read scriptures daily, that fits well in a daily podcast format.
Yeah, absolutely. And I knew from my own experience that there are plenty of people who struggled to read the scriptures daily. They would miss days, they would get behind and then feel like they can never catch up, that kind of thing. So I thought a little 5 or 6 minute episode every morning would be an easy way to get people started in that kind of a journey. And so I did my research and I began on January 1st, 2018. It was the very first episode I launched. Had 0 listeners from the start and honestly didn't know how it was going to go. I didn't promote it much. I just told people that I knew, and I don't know exactly how it all happened, but within the first month, we had 300-ish downloads per episode going on. So I knew something was right. And looking back on it, Nathan, I think maybe this is the first tip I would give to anybody is make sure that your podcast name includes the keywords that people searching for your podcast would be using to find a podcast. So mine, the full name is The Morning Mindset Daily Christian Devotional. So I had morning, I had mindset, I had Christian, I had devotional, things I knew my particular audience would be searching for.
If you had to do it again, would you add the word Bible or the word scriptures or something like that to it?
I might, but, I don't know. To me, after a while, it gets to be such
pretty
a mouthful.
Long already.
Yeah, it gets to be such a mouthful. I don't know that it would be worth saying all the time. But, it started then January 1st and took off from there. And the rest is kind of history. Been going since then. And I mean, you read all the stats. It blows my mind as much as it blows anybody's mind.
If you're going to do a daily show, do you need to keep it shorter like you have?
I think so. I think, I have clients who have multiple episodes per week. So say 2 episodes a week. and they're both 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 45 minutes. And to me, that's quite an ask, to ask your audience to consume your content twice a week for almost an hour. To me, that's a lot. So if you're doing a daily show and you're trying to hit even a third of that length, I think it's a huge ask to ask people. If you're going to pull that off, I think your content would have to be incredibly relevant and incredibly good every single episode, or else the numbers that grow at first could really drop. So that's why I started out with a 5-minute episode. And over the years, it's stretched to 7, and I've scaled it back to 6 now. And that's where I've been sitting for quite a while, is about 6. And I think most people really appreciate the shorter length.
A lot of times people think that when we give away something for free, it's free, but it's not. People aren't just paying for something, they're also trading time for it.
That's right.
And when people, whatever they trade, whether it be money or time, we have to give them far more value than what they're trading for them to be willing to do it and continue to do it. And so if we're doing a 30 to 40 minute show, we've got to give way more than 30 to 40 minutes of value. And getting it down to 5-6 minutes, makes it a lot easier they're not expecting as much in return, although I'm sure you're giving tons of value in return, but it's a lot easier to overcome that threshold at just a 5 or 6 minute show. So it's worked in the Bible space, and I've seen some really good scripture study daily shows. What are some of the other niches where daily shows might work?
Yeah, well, I know, and like I said before, personal development, I've seen a lot of that. I've seen business coaching shows that are a little 3 to 4 minute quick tips, sort of an idea. Yeah. I've seen shows in real estate, believe it or not, real estate coaches who would do a daily real estate tip or sales tip or customer relationship tip.
Sure.
That kind of a thing. I think you could get really creative with it, but the difficulty is going to be having actionable, good content over the long haul. Because if you think about your average expert and what they know about their field that actually is applicable to a common person who might be listening, they may easily run out of little short quick tips within a month, within 2 months, within 3 months. And then what are you going to do? You can really tell when a podcaster is kind of blowing smoke because they've run out of good content.
Right.
And you don't want to do that. You want to make sure you've got what you need to do content over the long haul.
Okay. So with the Bible, you had a lot of great content to pull from. But doing it 8 years or however many years you've done it now, how have you been able to keep it fresh? What's been your secret to do that?
Well, there's 2 approaches that I've taken. Sometimes it'll be topical. So I'll have a series of episodes, say a 3-week series or a 6-week series that are all about a specific topic. So humility or faith or even mindset. I just did one at the beginning of this year that was all about mindset and what the Bible has to say about mindset. That's one way to do it. That takes a little more work, honestly, because you have to scour the Bible yourself and find all the verses and then, decide which ones you're going to talk about and what you're going to say about them and all that. The other way that I go about it, which is my normal way of doing it, is to just teach what I call expositionally, verse by verse, through a book of the Bible. So I've taught through Ephesians. I've taught through, right now we're finishing up the Gospel of John. I've taught through the life of some characters in the Old Testament. I've taught through various Psalms in the Old Testament. And that is already kind of laid out for you. You have to follow the argument of the passage. You have to follow the logic that's already there. And then the tough part in that is applying it, giving some sort of an application for the listener that fits both the topic and modern life. And so that's how I keep it fresh. I just follow the outline that's laid out for me.
How long do you think? I mean, you could go forever on the Bible. There's so many different angles and directions and never ending.
Yeah.
Okay?
I've been doing it for 6 years now and I don't see an end in sight. I do think that, the day is going to come when I'm 70, 75, 80, I don't know how old, and just don't want to do it anymore. And my oldest son, who today is 32 years old, is a pretty good Bible teacher himself. And so at some point, I'm going to pull him in and we'll trade off doing episodes so I can introduce him to the audience. And then in time, I'll just pass it on to him and let him take it over.
Whatever niche somebody's in, let's say you were in the plumbing niche, right? Then you need to find a tip or a trick or a secret or something that they need to know every day. Find a repository of information you can pull from and break it up into small little daily tidbits.
Yeah. And I would say do your homework beforehand to make sure you're going to be able to do that. Because the last thing you want to do is get about 40 days in and realize, I don't know what else to say.
And with the daily show, you really can't do a guest because you don't have time to introduce a guest and go back and forth. So a daily show is probably a monologue by definition.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think maybe you could do a guest, and then, you would have to intentionally record your conversation in a way that you can slice and dice into multiple episodes. I don't think that's the best way to do it. I mean, to me, a conversation needs to be a continuous thing. And so you'd really have to work at it hard to do that on a daily basis, I think.
What is the hardest thing that you've gone through in these last 6 years running this daily show? The biggest challenge, and how'd you get through it?
Yeah, well, the biggest challenge is consistency. If you're sick one day, or if you have a vacation planned and you don't really want to record the podcast, you got to figure out how you're going to be consistent getting your episodes out, even though you're out of pocket, so to speak. And how I got through it is really one of the secrets of doing a daily show. And that is that you have to have, number one, have good systems in place. So a common template, a common framework with which you're going to approach every episode. And then secondly, I couldn't survive if I didn't batch record my episodes.
Yeah.
The very first year that I did it, I was recording 5 a day, Monday through Friday, and scheduling them out in advance. And I just kept at that for, oh gosh, I don't know how long I did that, 3, 4, 5 months, until at one point, it was August of that first year, and I was done through the rest of the year. And so I just took a break and didn't record any, and didn't really like that. I didn't like having such a big break. And so what I've reverted to now is I record 7 episodes at once, and that's for the coming week. And then 2 days prior to those being done, I'll record the next 7 and schedule those out. And so I'm always fairly fresh. It enables me too that if there's some cultural issue going on or some worldwide event like the Ukraine war, things like that, I can actually make commentary about what's happening and be relevant and fresh to the world events that are going on.
What is your greatest secret to success? Your secret sauce that has helped you get to 65 million downloads?
Yeah, well, I think the secret sauce is relationship with listeners. I have kind of stumbled on this in my approach, and over time have developed little things that I do that really foster relationship with the people who are listening. Number one is I'm always inviting people to contact me. I give my email address out on the podcast. I reply to those emails myself. I keep myself available for people via email. And I like email personally because I can reply when I can reply rather than, have feeling like with a chat message or something, I've got to get right back to people. But I have to commit that I'm going to reply because I want people to know that I'm available. Secondly, I speak to listeners as if they're my friends. And I even say, hello, friends, at the beginning of the episodes. I want to have that familiarity of relationship with people. And then thirdly, I use common terminology all the time. I say at the beginning of every episode or somewhere along the line, it's time to get our mind aligned with the truth of God's word. And that kind of has a lilt to it, has a feeling to it. And Nathan, I can't tell you the number of people who, when they email me, say something about, I love how the podcast helps me get my mind aligned. I mean, they pair it back to me, the phraseology that I've used. And to me, that's a sign that this is actually benefiting people in the way that I want it to. So it's all about the relationship. It's out of the relationship that the downloads continue to grow, the relationship that the monetization possibilities even exist. It's all about the relationship.
What are the pros and the cons of doing a daily show?
Well, the pros, I think, is that you can gain traction really fast, especially if you're producing good content, which you should be. That's just another lesson from all the clients I've worked with. If you're not committed to producing good content, don't waste people's time. Just go and do something else that is more of a hobby to you. Podcasting is asking, like you said, someone's time. That's a valuable commodity, and you want to fill that with good things. The pitfalls, man, I think the consistency is part of it. You got to figure out a system that's going to work for you, and you've got to be ready for the work that it takes to pull off that system. Batch recording helps. Getting organized at the beginning helps. Having a similar format for every episode helps. it's just a lot of work. So you got to be ready for that.
Yeah. I did a daily show on digital monetization for a year and it kicked my butt. It was so hard.
It is hard.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Okay. What does it take to do it really well?
Oh man, that's a hard question. It's hard to be that objective about what I do. I think you don't have to feel like you got to have this perfect plan formulated at the beginning. It's one of the things I love about podcasting is you can figure it out as you go. And as long as the content you're giving has value, listeners are patient. They'll wait for you to get things ironed out. And so things like episode format, things like when I'm going to promote something, when I'm not, all those things have come over time. And I've been able to figure out a cadence that works for my audience. But I think another thing that's helped me to do it really well is really to listen to my audience. I have a lot of people reply to me and tell me, I really appreciate it when you include the reference to the scripture in the notes for the episode or in the description, things like that. I listen and I try and pay attention to what's going to be helpful to my audience. And then if it's possible and it's not too heavy of a lift given what I'm already doing, I'll go ahead and add it to my workflow. And the results seem to be speaking for themselves.
Yeah, I like that concept of listening. Well, how do you listen to them? How are they giving you that feedback? Is it emails that come into you?
Yeah, it's almost always emails. I will have people here and there will somehow find my phone number and call me. I don't know how that happens, but it's happened a handful of times. And, I'm happy to talk to people. It's not a problem. But it's usually through email. And they'll tell me, when a certain technology doesn't work right, like a form on my website, or they'll tell me that last episode, there was something in the levels that really hurt my ears. It's unusual. And that helps me troubleshoot issues. And then I get feedback about the content as well. Probably second year in, I switched the music that I use for the podcast. And man, you should have heard the uproar. There were so many people. What happened to the other music? I love that music, and found out really quickly that, something about the music that I was using had caught people's attention and kind of made it feel like their own thing in a way. It's hard to explain. But I quickly went back to the other music because it's not that I didn't like it before. I just thought it was time for a change, and found out people really like the identity that a consistent sound gives.
Are there any stories that you've received from those users that have impacted you the most?
Oh man, Nathan, I can't tell you how many. I get emails, probably 3 or 4 a week at least, of people telling me the things that to me sound crazy. They say things like, the morning mindset has changed my life and here's how. And they'll tell me these things. The morning mindset has saved my life. I was about to kill myself and I heard this particular episode, and they'll tell me the date and the name. And I'm just blown away at the things that have happened in people's lives. About 2 years ago, or maybe it's 3 years ago now, my wife and I, receiving these kinds of comments all the time, decided that we were going to establish a nonprofit to help with needs that people had, just absolute physical needs. And our theory was people who are listening who have a need probably could be connected with another person who's listening who has the means to help meet that need. And so kind of like a GoFundMe campaign, we had a nonprofit set up on our website where people could go and see all the needs that we had personally vetted and then give toward those needs. And once the money came in, we would send it to the person or send it to pay off the bill or whatever.
Yep.
And we did that for 3 years and paid off something like $225,000 worth of needs. So there's all kinds of stories like that as well. The nonprofit is no longer in operation just because we ran out of bandwidth and felt like we needed a break. But, that kind of thing has happened a lot through the podcast, and I've just been shocked.
Yeah, a lot of good people that want to help. Okay, so one of the greatest benefits I received from my podcast, what I learned myself. What is something that you've learned that's been the greatest takeaway for you personally from this show?
That I feel like I've learned the most has to do with learning something about myself. I've never thought of myself as a compassionate, sympathetic, warm person. I mean, I don't think I'm cold or anything, but I don't naturally come by those kinds of emotions and feelings toward others. But as people have sent me emails and as I've responded and as I've seen the impact that my response even has on them, I've learned about myself that I have more of that in me than I thought. And I am able to be a blessing and an encouragement to people in ways that I didn't really even know was possible. And so learning that about yourself is really a good thing, that you do have a capacity to help people. And I think it's true of all of us. We have a capacity to be an encouragement, be a support, uplift somebody rather than, put them down or be aloof. Why are we in the world if we're not here to help each other?
I love it. That's one of the greatest benefits of having a podcast, is being able to make a difference, give back. What advice would you give to new podcasters that are about to launch a daily podcast?
Man, the best advice I could give you is to think it through in terms of the workload. Make sure you know how you're going to record your episodes consistently, how you're going to fill them with great content, and how you're going to stick with it. Because that daily show has got to be worthwhile, first of all, and it's got to be consistent, second of all. Now, none of that's to say, like you, Nathan, you can't do a daily show for a year and then be done with it. I mean, of course you can do that if that's your game plan. But my game plan was to just make this a standing resource that people could read, could use day after day after day.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
You've got to be clear on what you're doing and why, and get your systems in place to make it happen.
You've talked about a couple things that you did, a couple of strategies to grow your show. You talked about producing a lot of content, how there's a lot of episodes to download. You've talked about the SEO in the title. What other strategies could you share with other podcasters to help them grow their shows?
Sadly, I don't know how my show has grown other than the hand of God and the word of mouth of listeners. I don't promote it on any social media platforms, really. I mean, I'll publish the episode on Facebook every day when it comes out, but that's about it. I don't reshare it. I don't promote much at all. I've not done much cross promotion. I've not done any marketing, none of that. But one thing I do at least once a week, maybe every other week, is I will encourage listeners to think about the impact the morning mindset has had on them, and then to think about who do they know who they think could use the same sort of encouragement or the same sort of a blessing in their own life. And then to pause the episode right then and share the morning mindset with that person. And I do that pretty regularly, asking people to share with the people in their network. And I try to encourage them to understand that because we're talking about the scriptures, they can make an eternal difference in somebody's life if they just share, this opportunity to get into God's word together. And it seems like people do that. Every time I get those emails, probably every third one says, I'm telling my friends about it. I'm telling my family about it, So there's a number of people who picked up the ball on that and are running with it.
So the lesson for other podcasters is to not be shy to ask for referrals and figure out how to do that on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and I would say figure out how to do it in a way that makes the person doing it aware of how they're helping someone else. Because if you're just asking, hey, would you help me spread the news about the show? Well, that's an ask about you. It's not about the listener. It's not about someone else. So you want to make it about the listener and make it about who they can help. And it really seems to have a much bigger impact that way.
That is great advice. Thank you very much. You've mentioned monetization a little bit earlier in this episode. Can you share with us the monetization strategies that you've used, maybe what's worked and what hasn't?
Yeah, well, the very first thing I did was I have a number of self-published books that I've written over the years. And so periodically, I would say things about those books. I would give a little blurb for a specific one and tell them where they can go find it, that kind of thing. That started helping the books to sell a little more, but none of it was life-changing. It was just trickling in funds here and there. After a while, I came across a platform called Supercast, which is a podcast membership sort of a platform where I can set up a separate podcast feed inside of Supercast send people there to become a monthly partner. So they're paying $5, $10, $25, $45, whatever I decide the different levels would be. It's kind of like Patreon. And they could become a monthly supporter of the Morning Mindset. And that is what really took off. A lot of people really want to get behind what I'm doing when it's benefiting their life. And so they'll support some large amounts, some small amounts, but it's been very significant. And then beyond that, I had some efforts at monetization with sponsors at a certain point, and I was being very picky about the sponsors and made a little bit of money from that, but didn't like, all the rigmarole I had to go through to do that. So what I wound up doing was just making it available to listeners to be a daily sponsor of the podcast. So someone might fill out the form, pay the suggested donation amount, which at this point is $100 to sponsor a daily episode. And they can do it in any way they want. They can do it by saying, I have a blog to encourage Christian men. Here's the name of it. And I mentioned that on the episode as I mentioned them as a daily sponsor. They may do it in memory of their grandmother who passed away. They may do it just in general support of what we're doing at the Morning Mindset. And they can do it anonymously. They can have me mention their name, whatever, but it takes about 40 seconds. It's real simple. And people seem to like belonging to the community and being known to support what they believe in. And so that's started to generate a little more income that way.
Any other monetization strategies, or are those the primary ones right there?
Those are the primary ones I mentioned to you before we started recording. I've switched to a new media platform. And it's because this media platform has, I guess, their big box kind of advertisers that want to be on shows. And they agreed to let me have those advertisements at the end of the show. Since it's a daily show, it's only 6 minutes long. It didn't make sense to me to have a mid-roll anywhere. So they agreed to that. And so I've recently moved over and, to be honest, it's taken a while to get rolling and I haven't seen much from it yet, but I expect over time it might produce a little more.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Carey. And thank you for the value that you've added. I've learned a bunch. If our audience has also found value in this episode and want to learn more about you and your show and your books, what are the best ways for them to do that?
Well, I would just send you to one website. It's the URL is yourmorningmindset.com. And that'll take you right to the page on our media company website where the Morning Mindset can be found. And from there, you can find other podcast books, how to be a supporter, all that kind of stuff. It's all right there.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Nathan.
Here are my key takeaways from this episode. Number 1, daily podcast episodes should be short, maybe 5 to 6 minutes or even less. It's very difficult to sustain longer daily episodes long-term. Number 2, have a large repository of content to pull from so you don't run out of ideas. For a Christian podcast, the Bible provides endless content. Number 3, batch record episodes to have a backlog so you can still release episodes consistently when you're sick or on vacation. Number 4, develop personal relationships with your listeners by conversing with them, not at them, and actively incorporating their feedback. Number 5, ask listeners to share the podcast with others who would benefit rather than just requesting general shares. Number 6, monetize through linking to your other products and services, paid subscriber benefits, and user donations and tips. And finally, number 7, the greatest reward can be the impact on your own learning and growth, as well as making a difference in the lives of your listeners. If you're looking for a great all-in-one podcasting platform with more than 35 integrated modules that can help you create, grow, and monetize a business around a podcast, you can get a free trial at podup.com. Thanks for joining us for this episode. I wish you success in producing and growing a daily podcast.